Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and in today's video we're going to do something slightly different. We're going to take a look at this thing, the T95/FV4201 Chieftain, Tier 10 British. It's not really a premium tank, it's a Clan Wars reward tank I believe, but it's a heavy tank either way. And the reason we're going to take a look at this is twofold. One, because there are a couple of tanks that have been introduced into the game over the last couple of years that a lot of people describe as kind of Tier 11 tanks. And they seem to be perhaps a little bit good for Tier 10, which is where they're placed, and this is one of them. And also because Lorenzo, all praise the mighty Lorenzo, actually sent me some replays from himself and some clanmates playing around in this thing. Now I would like to qualify, what is going to follow is not a full tank review of this thing because I do not own it, I have never played it, and so I don't think I can have a fully formed opinion on it. What instead we're going to try and do is have a look at the relative strengths and weaknesses of this thing compared to a couple of other tier 10s and try and work out how we think it plays out, how you can kill these things on the battlefield, and we're going to have a look at a variety of different gameplay. That is the general idea. So, with all that said, let's kick off. So the first thing you have to bear in mind when trying to look at this thing, we're going to be using tanks.gg for the statistics here, but if you're not familiar with exactly what the name is, it's not actually immediately obvious what tank you're looking for. So, it's a tier 10, heavy, British. Fine. This is the list that comes up if you look for that. It's not the FV215B and it's not the Super Conqueror, but there's the Chieftain Mark 6, the T95/Chieftain, the T95/FV4201 Chieftain. Now, as far as I understand it, the Chieftain Mark 6, these are all pretty similar tanks, but the Chieftain Mark 6 is available on the Chinese server only. The Chinese server in World of Tanks is a very special place where, for slightly paradoxical situation, I guess, where you can essentially buy any tank in the game client for enough money. And you can buy the Chieftain Mark 6 on the Chinese server for a truly ludicrous sum of cash. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it is all of the money. That's not the tank we're considering. The T95/Chieftain, not exactly sure what that is to be honest, but the one we're interested in is the T95/FV4201 Chieftain. This is not the Chieftain, the historical Chieftain. This is an American T95 hull with a FV4201 Chieftain turret slapped on top. Be careful you don't get the wrong way round, because if you were to look, for example, at the British Tier 8 machines, and let's change this to mediums from heavy tanks, suddenly we notice there's a Chieftain/T95. That's a Chieftain hull with a T95 turret slapped on it. That's not the one we're looking at. We're looking at the T95/FV4201 Chieftain. Have I got that right? We're about to find out. Yay, I got it right. So, without further ado, let's have a quick butchers of that thing. Right, so as I talk about this machine, I'm going to be comparing it to what I think are the two tanks that make the closest comparison, or the most sensible comparison. We have the regular British Tier 10 heavy tank, the Super Conqueror, and we have the recently buffed American Tier 10 heavy tank, the T110E5. Between them, I think that should be able to highlight the strengths and weaknesses of the T95/FV4201 here. Now, I said this thing is not the Chieftain, but I'm probably going to refer to it colloquially as the Chieftain, because it makes life easier, or I might take a leaf out of Pansy's book and just call it the Donqueror. Anyway, straight off we have a worse DPM than the other two tanks. That in and of itself is not necessarily terrible, because the Super Conqueror and the T110E5 for Tier 10 heavy tanks have pretty respectable DPM. But you'll notice we have 270 pen with regular ammo on this tank. This thing, for anyone who's not aware, gets a beefed up 120mm gun. I believe this is technically the L11A1 or something like that. 120mm gun, Royal Ordnance. But the penetration is around about 10-ish millimeters higher than the other two tanks, which is nice to have. Perhaps not groundbreaking or not game-breaking, perhaps I should say, but it is nice to have, and I believe that does make it the highest base penetration of any heavy tank in the game. Now, I've been looking at quite a few replays of this thing, and what I've noticed a lot of people doing is firing lots and lots of premium ammunition out of it, which seems a bit weird, because the premium ammo isn't actually that great. It's very similar to the premium ammo from the Super Conqueror. So if you're firing the premium ammunition, you're kind of closer to a Super Conqueror than if you took the two tanks firing regular ammo. Anyway, alpha damage of 440, that's not super high for tier 10, but it is higher than other comparable tanks, and it is higher than the other two in this comparison. Module damage, 120mm guns across the board, nothing surprising there. Low rate of fire, which makes up, is because of that higher alpha damage, and that's where the lower DPM comes in, though I would like to say it's only lower by about 200. And shell velocity, this thing I believe fires APCR as standard, so shell velocity is pretty good at 1150 meters per second, making this thing relatively decent at longer ranges. An ammo capacity of 40 rounds, which is roughly the same as the other two tanks, but because the alpha damage is 10% higher, that allows the FV4201 here to do more damage than either of the other two in this comparison. So, straight off the bat, we essentially have a 120mm gun that sacrifices a bit of DPM in exchange for penetration and alpha damage, and shell velocity. Okay, people often say alpha damage is king in World of Tanks, so that seems to be a pretty good start for the T95/FV. If we have a look at gun handling, well, this is a very interesting story. The gun handling is, so you have a 2-second aim time, which is slightly worse than the other two, but frankly is still perfectly good. You have 0.34 base dispersion, slightly worse than the Super Conqueror, the same as the E5. You have marginally worse gun handling than the Super Conqueror, but the gun handling for moving and traversing the tank are the same as the E5, it's only when traversing the turret that the E5 is better. So, those stats so far, taking everything into consideration, the gun handling is a little bit worse, and the accuracy is a little bit worse than on the other two tanks in this comparison. Okay, I mean, worse is worse, but it's only a little bit. Gun elevation is 20 degrees, better than the other two. Gun depression is 10 degrees, same as the Super Conqueror, better than the T110E5. So overall, if we have a look at the gun, we trade a little bit of accuracy and a little bit of gun handling, and a little bit of DPM, and in exchange, we get a higher damage potential, higher penetration, and higher alpha damage. And higher shell velocity. I mean, I think even if you were going to be generous to the other two tanks in this comparison, you'd say the gun is comparable with the Super Conqueror and T110E5, and I would personally say the gun is a little bit better, because I think that extra 10% alpha damage really does weigh in at that point. Mobility-wise, and it's faster than the other two, let's not beat around the bush here. You have a significantly higher forward speed at 46 compared with 34 for the Super Conqueror and 37 for the E5. You have a higher reverse speed at 15. You have a power to weight ratio of over 16.5 on what is supposed to be a heavy tank. A heavy tank. Your ground resistances on hard terrain are better than the other two tanks. Medium terrain are the same. Soft terrain are worse a bit. Your turret traverse is a little bit worse than the other two, but your tank traverse and effective traverse speeds are essentially better. So you have a comparable, I would argue, slightly better gun, and you're faster. Okay. If we just move on, we're going to have a look at the armour layout in just a moment. Hull armour, 127, 88.9, 48. I mean, it's all much of a muchness. The T110E5 has better hull armour, okay? Fine. The T110E5 has better hull armour. The Super Conqueror is much more about going hull down, using your 10 degrees of gun depression if you want to bounce anything with the hull, and it looks like the FV is probably a similar kettle of fish. Turret front, it says 350 on the front of the turret here compared with 279 and 203, but all things considered, we're going to have a look at that in more detail later on, but definitely the majority of the armour seems to be on the front of the turret on this thing, so if you get the hull, you can probably damage it. Fine. Like the Super Conqueror. Health, 2,200, a little bit lower than the Super Conqueror, comparable to the T110E5. Engine hit points, middle of the pack, and track and ammo rack hit points are the same. We're going to have a look at the armour in more detail in a moment, but at the moment it doesn't appear that the survivability of this tank is going to be a hideous problem. And this is where I'm going to throw something else in that isn't obvious from these numbers, but is going to become apparent in a moment. The T95/FV4201 is actually quite a small heavy tank. And so that means that on top of these numbers for survivability, you have to factor in the fact that it's quite small and hard to hit for a heavy tank. And so I would be really tempted to say, and again we're going to look at the armour profile in a minute, but it's kind of looking like the armour is at least as good as the Super Conqueror, and possibly better. Or survivability is possibly better. You could argue the 200 hit points might be worth the smaller tank profile. We'll see. And camo rating is better because it's a smaller tank. In fact, it's better across the board. Now, this is a heavy tank. That doesn't mean the camo is good. It's not. But it's better than the others. Oh, and it has a 410 base meter view range. Compared with 400 on the others. And it has a lower fire chance, 15% compared with 20%. And just to add insult to injury, the shells cost 10 credits less. Okay. So we have survivability that seems, let's say, comparable with the Super Conqueror, and I guess the T110E5. We have gun performance that some people might try and claim is comparable, but I would argue the gun is better. And mobility is just flat out better than the other two. And just for the record, the T110E5 again has recently been buffed, and the Super Conqueror is generally considered one of the better tier 10 heavy tanks. Chinny chin chin. Let's have a look at that armour profile, shall we? So, here's the armour profile, and immediately as soon as you look at this you might be going, oh, well, quite a lot of that looks pennable. Oh, that's fine. Armour isn't going to be that great. Well, let's just hold your horses a moment. Now, the hull is not very good. Well, I say it's not very good. The armour on this tank may not always be thick, but it is well angled. Okay, so let's assuming you're looking at this tank just head on, straight from the front. Lower plate is 150 odd mil thick at a 48 degree angle, making it about 230 effective. So the lower plate, I'm not going to say the lower plate is great, it's not. But remember, this is a tier 10 tank. Against tier 8s firing standard ammunition, it's not a reliable penetration for them. Let's leave it there. The upper plate, we're up to about 250, 260 effective armour. Oh. Well, that's up to the point where actually a tier 10 tank firing standard ammunition is not guaranteed to penetrate. No, it is not. Okay, there's a little strip up here that's only 50.8mm thick, but it's angled back at over 70 degrees, so unless you're packing a 153mm gun, not 152, 153mm gun or larger, you're not going to be overmatching that. Not completely anyway. Ho-hum. Okay, what about the turret? Well, these red bits are thick. They're like 350mm of armour. That's the 350 it's talking about when you look at the raw numbers. Not much of a gun mantlet going on. In fact, there's very little gun mantlet going on. In fact, there's not really any gun mantlet going on, but 350mm of armour at these sort of angles, you're getting 400, 500, 390 fairly easily. Okay, well, they're the strong bits. What about the weak bits? Okay, well, that's 175mm of armour angled back at 60 degrees, making it 353. Oh. What about over here? Well, that's 260mm of armour angled back at 56 degrees, making it 466mm. What about here? Well, that's 215mm angled back at 55 degrees, making it 370. Okay, how thick's the turret roof? Well, the turret roof, okay, it's angled back at an auto bounce, but we should be able to overmatch that, right? Well, it's 57mm thick. So, if I just do a little quick bit of maths, you're going to need and here's the kicker, 172mm gun to overmatch that. that means that the Jagdpanzer E100 cannot overmatch the turret roof of this tank. The only things that can are, perhaps ironically, the two British premium, well not premium, sorry, tier 10 tank destroyers with the big fat 183mm naval guns. Oh, but there's a weak spot. Oh, yes, there is a weak spot. It's 90 odd mil thick, it's 180mm, 200mm effective. So, yeah, there is a weak spot. But do you notice what I haven't done here? Oh, and the sides are trash. Like, the sides suck, because of course they do. And the rear sucks, because of course it does. But do you notice what I haven't done here? You're very rarely going to be facing it like this. This thing has 10 degrees of gun depression. So okay, so this thing of course has 10 degrees of gun depression, a good turret front, and so what the driver of this tank is going to want to do is fight you like this. From like a hill or a ridgeline or something. So what does the armour look like then? Well, lower front plate is pathetic, but it doesn't matter because that will be covered up. Upper front plate... 400mm of effective armour on the upper front plate. You're not doing anything with that unless you're a Jagdpanzer E100 firing heat. And as for the turret... oh dear, 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 dear. Just in case any of you have only got the audio on and you're not actually watching this. The weakest part of this turret I have found, okay, is right next to the gun, toward the bottom of the turret. About the weakest this thing gets is around 290mm. About there. And you can't even see his weak spot anymore. Okay. Oh, sorry, one other thing I should mention, because I think I forgot to mention it earlier on. Let's just have a look at the ammunition this thing fires. So, regular rounds are APDS, APCR in terms of the game, and it's the L15 gun, sorry, not the L11. Anyway, 440 alpha, 270 pen. If you decide to fire premium ammo, 440 alpha, 322 pen. That penetration is nothing special. If you want to switch to high explosive, 530 alpha, and the pen goes up to 140. This thing actually has some quite nice high explosive rounds now. Okay. I think we get the idea of what this tank is good at. You stick it on a ridgeline, and you laugh at all the puny mortals who are trying to do anything to you. How are you going to deal with it? So, if you have shots into the rear of this thing, the rear is 48mm thick. If you have halfway, 35 on the back of the turret, if you have halfway decent high explosive rounds, you'll make him very, very sad. Side profile of this tank is not very good. Just don't shoot it in the front of the turret. Anywhere else and you'll be fine. So if you can flank this thing, great. If you can get it in the rear, great. That's nothing particularly special, but hurrah. The top of this tank is not particularly thick. It will not take artillery very well. Artillery are your friends, believe it or not. If you are fighting this tank and it has to be frontally, try and do so when he's not using his gun depression, so that at least you can engage his lower front plate. If you're in a tier 10 tank, that should be a relatively reliable penetration. If you're in a tier 8 tank, load the gold to make it a relatively reliable penetration. If you must fight a hull down, let's just call it the chieftain. If you must fight a hull down chieftain, then don't. But if you really, really must, use high explosive, because you're not penning this turret unless you've got a shot at his weak spot, and even then he's got pretty decent gun handling. He's probably going to hit you first. But something I want to point out that I think a lot of people will gloss over. This thing has no gun mantlet, and if you put a high explosive round into the front of his turret, the way high explosive works, it creates an explosion radius around itself, and the game finds the point within that explosion radius against which you will do the most damage, assuming your HE round hasn't penetrated, and it will calculate the damage against that point. Now, in this particular case, this is actually quite a small tank, it's low profile. A high explosive round to the front of the turret will most likely catch that 50mm armour plate at the top of the hull there, and so the damage will be calculated against that. This is a long-winded and wishy-washy way of saying HE to the front of this turret will most likely do a considerable or a respectable amount of damage. If you're rolling around with a 15cm or 152mm, 155mm gun in your tier 10 heavy tank, HE to the front of the turret will make this machine a sad panda. Really, the way you need to deal with this is, imagine someone took the Super Conqueror, which is already a decent tank, and just ramped it up to 11. I can see why some people think this thing's a bit of an abomination, if I'm honest. It's not a completely I hold down W and YOLO through your entire team tank. It's not that sort of thing. It's I hold down W until I find a ridgeline, sit on the ridgeline, and murder your entire team sort of tank. This is the sort of tank that kind of justifies artillery still being in this game. This is the sort of tank that justifies large caliber, high explosive rounds at tier 10 still being a thing because this tank is stupid. Okay, are we all on the same page? Let's have a look at a little bit of gameplay. Okay, so we've looked at some numbers, but that doesn't always tell the full story. I still remember when the E25 was released and several prominent World of Tanks YouTubers said it would suck because the penetration wasn't very good. And yeah, spoiler alert, they were not correct. So what we're going to do is have a look at some gameplay. Now, like I said, some of this was provided by Renz and his clanmates. Now, I've had to slightly change the games that I was actually going to use for this video because I've had some issues with some of the replays that were sent to me, and my apologies. It seems some of the textures are also flickering a little bit. I'm not sure if that's game client or replay problems or what, but the point is I have had some issues. So I'm going to show you this game, and then I've got another game to show you, which is going to be a little sillier. So we are joining Renz himself here. At the time, he was part of the Narf clan. I just want to put an S in front of that and go around going Schneif Schneif, but never mind. Tier 10 match, obviously. I mean, he's in a tier 10 tank, and this is a match with tier 8 in it. It's not full 3-5-7 matchmaking. It's like 4, 5, 6, but hey ho. And we're going to see what we can do here. Now, straight away, we're here on Live Oaks. Renz has come over to this sort of hilly region over here. And, oh, hello, Super Conqueror. That's an interesting bit of a match-up there. He's come over to this sort of hilly region over here. And, you know, he can go hull down here. And there's no artillery in this game. And, like, oh, these guys. Now, Renz, I've seen a lot of replays with the FV here, as I've mentioned when we were talking about the stats, that are just gold spam, gold spam, gold spam, and I didn't want to show you those sorts of games because I don't think it really gives you the best impression of the tank. Like, a lot of tanks can look incredibly good if all you ever do is dab the 2 key. Renz doesn't do that. You can see he does carry some premium ammunition, but he's not just going to fire premium at everyone's face. Now you can see he got himself here into a nice forward location. Oh, bounce on the Centurion Action X there. I say a forward location, you know, he's not right at the front line at the time. He was providing a little bit of fire support to this Object 277 to our left, called Sheldon Cooper. Beautiful. But you know, he's not camping at the back and just farming all the scrubs from a safe distance, is what I'm getting at. Shot there that damages his gun, but that's, you know, quickly fixed. Quick note on consumables and whatnot and equipment. Pretty sure, well, Renz is clearly running Pudding and Tea to try and make the most of his tank, and I'm pretty sure he's probably, although I'm sure Renz will correct me if I'm wrong, running I would say a gun rammer, vertical stabilizers, and probably vents. This thing apparently has a 410 meter base view range, so he could be running coated optics, but my guess would be vents. Now, I would like to point out both of the replays I'm going to show you are from kind of about a year ago at this point. So they're from early, sort of late 2019, early 2020. So this will not be using equipment 2.0. As of equipment 2.0, I don't think it will really change that much. People will just manage to squeeze a little bit more out of the vents they whack on this thing, basically. Also bearing in mind, this is, like I mentioned, a no artillery match, so yeah, this thing won't take artillery particularly well, but in this case it won't have to. But again, you can see Ren's here, he's not base camping, he's getting stuck in, and you know, Super Conqueror, Centurion, they're both spamming the 2 key at him. Goodbye Mr. WZ, and he's taken 1 point of damage so far, perhaps slightly ironically, from the Centurion Action X not firing gold at him. Just good old-fashioned regular APCR. So a whole bunch of enemy tanks here, and this is really this tank in its element. Turret cheeks, oh, didn't quite go where he wanted. This is the tank in its element, and Ren's here, by the way, is actually loading the premium APCR, presumably to try and deal with the turret front on that Centurion Action X, or maybe it's to deal with this object. But there, just by the way, with the Object 263, there's a little bit next to the gun where there's some quite thin armour that you can see there, so actually you can load high explosive there and do quite a lot of damage. Anyway, Ren's is firing some premium ammunition here, which I do understand. He's under pressure, he does need to make these shots count, but he hasn't just been spamming premium ammunition the entire time, which, you know, that's what I tried, as I said, to avoid showing any replays where that was the case. Bear in mind, a number of these shots would have penetrated anyway if Ren's had fired regular ammo into the commander's hatch on that Centurion. He'd have penetrated regardless. Damaged gun again. So Ren's puts a premium round through the upper front plate of that Centurion, but he could have put a regular round through the turret cheeks and so on. Lower front plate of that object doesn't need the premium ammunition. Again, regular ammo would have done absolutely fine. And you can see here that with a respectable rate of fire, bounce there regardless of the ammo. Do you see what I mean? The premium ammunition is not actually making that much difference. It's interesting here that with 440 alpha and this rate of fire, the damage is really racking up quickly, and Ren's ammo is really disappearing quickly. So object, well, at that angle Ren's could have shot at the upper front plate and it would have probably gone through. I think that was Ren's sort of over-aiming a little bit. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Fair enough. But I would not be firing premium ammunition here. I don't think it's really Ren's best choice, as you can see, because it's no substitute for your shots going where you want them to. And this specific situation is where actually the Super Conqueror would do better, as it has better accuracy on the gun and about the same penetration on the premium ammunition. But there we go. That's what I was getting at when I said, when looking at the stats of this thing, if you fire premium ammunition in this tank, you're kind of degrading some of the advantage that this tank has over some of the other tier 10 heavies with its pretty high penetration on its standard rounds. Ren's did also use a HE round there or two to finish up a couple of tanks, which is perfectly sensible. So, the scoreline is 8-10. Ren's and his team, although there aren't many of them left, have managed to win the flank they were on. And he's telling his team, just please survive, I am coming, just camp if you have to, I don't care, just don't die. Just, of course, before the TS5 dies. But, you know, c'est la vie. Oh, bat chat, bat chat, bat chat. Oh, that was a bit unlucky. I mean, there was a good chance of that shot killing the bat chat, and it would have been a valuable kill. Oh, bat chat swerves around, and APCR, fast shell velocity, dead French medium tank. And that's Ren's 4th kill. Now there are 5 guys left on the enemy team. Worth pointing out as well, by the way, so far Ren's has bounced 6,600 damage with his armour. Like, hull down, the armour on this thing is brutal. There's Ren's 5th kill as the Jagdpanther 2 disappears. And Ren's can just go hull down on these train tracks here and really give these guys some problems. Reducing that, what is that thing over there? Object 277 to a one-shot. And, well, this is where Ren's could have done with more of that premium ammunition, because he's now facing against some pretty heavily armoured tanks, especially that Object 705. But we've also got the VK. It may only be tier 8, but it's packing pretty nice armour for a tier 8. The Jagdpanzer, of course, can bounce things. And the Object 277. So yeah, Having said that, the scoreline is now even at 11 kills apiece, and Renz is asking, do we know where the Jagdpanzer is? Can anyone spot? Now, the Jagdpanzer hasn't been spotted all game, and Renz's problem here is he's a little low on ammunition. He's got 12 rounds of ammo left, oh there's the object, including 2 rounds of high explosive, because, you know, he had to do quite a lot of damage on the other flank, and not all of his shots connected, unfortunately. Thankfully, it looks like the friendlies might be able to deal with that object. He's a one-shot, maybe? We'll have to see. Now, I understand Renz's caution here. Ooh, tree went over, as in Renz knocked one over. Object, object, object. No, that was a poorly aimed shot. His reticule dipped ever so slightly. And there's some cover there. But the friendly team managed to deal with it and take down that object. So good job, Mr. Standard B. Now, there's a little under 6 minutes left on this game, and this makes it a little bit awkward, because I would be willing to bet, given what's just happened to their teammates, the remaining enemy tanks, given that they have a one-shot Object 277, a Tier 8, and we don't know much about that Jagdpanzer. Oh, there's the Jagdpanzer. I'd be willing to bet. Renz is a little bit slow on the uptake here. He's typing. I'm willing to bet that they maybe don't want to keep pushing too much. Nonetheless, there's a nice little bit of communication there as Renz asks the M46 to go spot, and I assume it's the M46 who spots the Jagdpanzer there. Unlucky there, as Renz does not penetrate his shot and needs to be careful with these shots because he's running out of ammunition, switches to the VK, and like I said, that's really where you would actually want the premium ammunition to be available. So, but anyway, shooting at the side of the turret on that VK and bounces, because of course he bounces. Switching to premium ammunition to try and deal with this Jagdpanzer. And he's suggesting, Renz here, that the M46 keeps moving. Now, the interesting thing here is, like, they don't have to take these shots on the Jagdpanzer. Don't have to take these shots. He's asking the M46 to go and get some crossfire going. There is actually some communication going between teammates here, which is really nice to see. Oh, Jagdpanzer's moving, side shots, there we go. It's really nice to see some communication. It's just unfortunately that when you're typing, that means you may not always react as quickly as you might like to things happening. But this is the thing. This is where positional play beats ammunition choice, really, because the M46 pattern has 220 pen on its regular AP rounds, but the Jagdpanzer will get penned by that in the side. So between... Ooh, 277 killed the Ferdinand. Between Renz and this pattern, they should be able to set up a crossfire on the Jagdpanzer E100. So, Renz, by the way, in case you hadn't noticed, has done over 7,000 damage at this point, which is quite a lot, and 5 kills. So, but actually, if the remaining tanks can kill these two, that's a crucial contribution. Anyway, we are running a little bit short on time here. 3.5 minutes, a little bit less than, left on the clock. M46 pattern has gone all the way around, and he's clearly trying to spot that Jagdpanzer E100. Now, despite the fact the Jagdpanzer is a tank destroyer, the camouflage on that thing is not very good. It is, at the end of the day, a giant piece of German steel, approximately the size of Belgium. So, there's that. Object 277 is also clearly not particularly keen on pushing up, as, well, let's be honest, he hasn't got much in the way of health. Now, Renz actually pushes up, heading toward the enemy base here, or possibly trying to spot that Jagdpanzer, but this is a little bit awkward. This could very easily go wrong, and time is against them. 2.5 minutes left on the clock. Renz keeps pushing up, trying to see if he can spot any of these guys, and you could make the case to say maybe the M46 pattern should have capped, but to be fair, I think it was reasonable to think that the M46 pattern would be able to spot the Jagdpanzer, and actually the Jagdpanzer has relocated, and if they're going to apply cap pressure, they need to do it now. Renz is going back for the damage. I'm not sure if this is the right play or not, because Jagdpanzer's no longer spotted, and it's now 1 minute 50 left on the match. Takes 1 minute 40 for a single person to cap this. Oh dear. Oh no. No. Little bit of indecision there, unfortunately. But let's not focus on that. Let's focus on how this tank is holding up. As we can see here, with 1 minute 30 left on the game, the machine in question, Renz. Yeah, no, you're typing, you're wasting time. The Jagdpanzer. There we go. Shots on the Jagdpanzer. There we go. Another shot of damage in, but there's now no time to cap. They have to kill these guys. And this is going to be awkward. Renz is spotted with less than a minute left on the match. I don't think this is going to work. Ah, that's going to be such a shame. So this is one of those situations where Renz clearly has the hit points to work with, but he doesn't have the time with which to work them, I suppose. Could get the kill on the Object 277, but I'm pretty sure... Well, I guess the Standard B could pump a magazine into the Jagdpanzer. This isn't over yet. Oh, it is now. Renz just simply can't kill these guys in the time remaining. That's a shame. That's a massive shame. And shots on the Jagdpanzer. One into the lower front plate there. Takes a hit from the Jagdpanzer, but it doesn't really make a difference at this point. Can he reload and snag a kill on the 277? Yes, he can. And that's it. That's the game. That's a shame. Post-game stat time. So, alas, a painful result there for Renz. Second class mastery. He got heroic resistance, hence the second class mastery. Bruiser, duelist, fire for effect, shell-proof, cool-headed, steel wall, high caliber, and a top gun. 8,986 damage done, 6 kills, 802 basic speed, plus of course the experience for the heroic resistance there. Shout out should probably go to that Object 277, just shy of 7,000 damage from him, and a regular tech tree tank, albeit a pretty strong regular tech tree tank as well. Well done to him. 36 shots fired, 32 hits, 22 penetrations for that damage count. Couple of bits of splash with some HG there. Most of that damage, you know, a good 7,000 of it from pretty close range. 19 hits received, of which only 3 penetrated, and 2 of those were at the end when Renz was just throwing care to the wind to try and get some damage in. 6,630 damage blocked by his armour, 10 enemy vehicles damaged, 6 destroyed, 3.8 kilometres travelled, and because Renz burned through all his APCR, though he wasn't just firing APCR, that ended up being an 80,000 credit loss. I've seen so many games in this tank with loss numbers in credits bigger than that. Now, what I find interesting about this is Renz has 802 base experience plus 469 from heroic resistance. That's 1,271 base experience effectively, and it was only second class mastery. Wow. People are doing well in this thing. Now I'm going to come back to that thought in just a second, because I am actually going to... I don't want to say be critical of Renz here, but just point a couple of things out. So, one, with premium ammunition, if you're going to carry a limited stock of it, you do need to be very careful when you fire it. Renz fired it, I would say, in a situation where he didn't really need it, and thus didn't have it in a situation where he could have really done with it. And two, just about being decisive and not wasting time. So, communicating with your allies is great, but bear in mind as you're typing that's wasting time if something crops up. If you're communicating, that's one thing. If you're just complaining, that's another. And although I understand that Renz thought that pattern was going to go and sit in the cap circle and didn't, when the clock's ticking, ultimately don't rely on your allies, do something yourself. But nonetheless, that was still a very impressive result there for Renz. Now, I started asking myself, okay, if like 1,200 and something base experience is only enough for second class mastery, what do you need to ace this thing? So the next game I've got for you is one I found on What Replays, and it's going to be a little bit silly. So, here we go. This game is going to get a little bit silly. But I could have picked dafter ones. Remember, I wasn't trying to find a replay where someone was literally just emptying their wallet at people. But then, do bear in mind, this is going to be quite a lot of gold that's fired here. Like, this was not the most egregious example I could have fired. Spoiler alert, as it turns out, we're joining Gasubal here. As it turns out, he's going to end up having to fire a lot of ammunition. So he's going to burn through his premium ammo whether he likes it or not. Okay, he is starting off with premium ammo loaded, however. Now, like I said, I could have picked a sillier replay than this, but I didn't think it would be particularly interesting to watch someone sit there and farm an entire enemy team, or 2/3 of the enemy team or whatever, from relative safety a long way away and not actually get stuck into the fight. So this is not going to be one of those replays. I would like to point out here, in case you hadn't noticed, 2 marks of excellence on the gun barrel here for Gasubal, or Gaz as I'm going to call him. So yeah, Gaz clearly knows what he's doing, and that is a very weird position for an FV to be in, especially because the FV is not a tank that you can... I was about to say you can't get it anymore, but whatever. Point is, that's a bad position for the FV to be in. Now again, you might notice a common theme here, no artillery. As I mentioned, this tank does not artillery-like. Now straight away, I would say I don't think it's worth firing the premium ammunition in this particular scenario, because you don't need it. Like, look at the enemy team lineup. You only really need it for the... maybe you want to use it for the mouse, I guess, if you're going to pick a tank to use it on, but the rest... Oh, the Type 5 Heavy, I suppose, maybe. The rest is really not necessary. Anyway, all that aside, we'll just run with it. So, M48 pattern crossing there. Unfortunately, Gaz misses the opportunity to rail him, but he's just been hit, so I can understand his reticence. Shot there into the turret roof of the M103, and we're up to 1300 damage so far. That was never going to hit. The guy was pulling back, but I can understand Gaz taking the shot to try and do damage where possible. This is an ambitious play from the M103, though he does manage to put a shot into Gaz here. Where does that shot go? Yeah, straight down into the upper front plate from a slightly elevated position. No great surprise there. Now, again, you can see Gaz is trying to use his gun depression. He's trying to hide as much of his tank as he can. Not a great shot there, unfortunately. But I can understand why Gaz would want to take it. And, oh, hello, heavy tanks. How are you today? You good? I hope you're good. We're good. And just taking advantage of the flanks of all these guys. Nom 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 nom. Wait for the reload. Oh, there's a fire. It does feel a little bit weird having that long a reload with a 120mm gun, I'll be honest. I know, 10% higher alpha damage and whatnot. Oh, turret roof of the M103 or Cupola, whichever. Low damage roll there, 377 again. Remember, the alpha here is 440, same as that ST1 actually. But then a high damage roll, so that kind of evens out, and we're up to 3.6k damage already. So, anyone poking around here? Well, there goes the M103, killed by, of all things, it's the tier 10 German light tank. Sucks to be him. Turret front of the Type 5 Heavy, that tank is stupid, doesn't have weak spots, so, like, it's just so poorly balanced. You're going to get spammed with premium ammunition in that thing because people can't penetrate you without it a lot of the time. Deal. In fact, this is one of the few heavy tanks that might actually be able to do it some of the time at least. Maybe just over half the time or something like that, depending on the angle. Can Gaz pick up his first kill of this replay? Yes, he can. It took 5,000 damage to do it, but he has his first kill, despite, by the way, having been up here and being involved in the fight and having done 5,000 damage. Gaz's team are still 2 kills down. Like, sometimes you wonder what you have to do to get these teams over the line. And that was, I'm not entirely sure what tank that was. Oh, it's Type 61. Yeah, rail that Type 61. Sucks to be him. And just keep on firing. Just keep shooting. Like, when the chips look like they're down, all you can do is just keep positioning, firing your gun, trying to make it work. T110E4 takes out the Type, but the FV takes out the E4, and Gaz just continues to plonk shots into this Type 5 Heavy. Turret cheeks, boom, Type 5's now one shot, and Gaz is up to 7,500 damage. And, oh, he's using the AP gun. Fair enough, he's dead. Second kill for Gaz there. Who's next? Now, FV 4005 up here. That guy has a big fat squishy turret. Gaz could load high explosive if he wants to take advantage of this guy's big fat soft squishy turret. It depends if Gaz thinks his next shot will be at that FV or not. If he doesn't, then he doesn't want to load HE, and as it is, the Object 430 is his next target, so APCR into that guy. Remembering when I say APCR, of course, as well as the premium ammunition, this thing fires APCR as its standard ammo as well. So, last round of premium ammunition, by the way, and to be fair, the two most heavily armoured targets on the enemy team are dealt with. The mouse and the Type 5 have both gone to a better place. Object 257, upper front plate, elevated angle. It's not a difficult penetration. We're up to 9,000 damage, just in case you wanted to be aware. Only 2 kills, though. And still 2 kills down for his team. Oh, is that a penetration? That doesn't look like a penetration. Engine deck? No. If that had been a larger caliber gun, you could have completely overmatched the engine deck, but this is only a 120mm gun. I don't know how thick. Don't know how thick the engine deck is there off the top of my head, but a bit of a dicey shot to take. That one against the Object 430 might come back to haunt Gaz. Hello FV, how are you today? And the FV was firing AP. That's new. Given that high explosive would wreck this thing, it's curious that he should choose to fire AP in that scenario, but hey, whatever, I guess. M48 Fatten. There we go. Some damage into him as well. Down to 11 rounds of ammunition. By the way, some of those chancy shots earlier on possibly going to come back to haunt Gaz here. I mean, he's on 10,500 damage. You know. And even though people are spamming gold at him, he's... Ooh, oh, that was unlucky. He's still bounced 4,500 himself. Like I said, this game is going to be a little bit silly. Fatten, Fatten, Fatten. There we go. Nice shot there. Trying not to get hit by that Object 277. Although the enemy... Right, this is what you have to bear in mind. The friendly team were 3 tanks down, but then there are 3 one-shots here. So that's the sort of thing that can actually balance itself out pretty quickly, as long as you don't get yourself too caught up on the fact that your team is down on Tinky Tonks. So, who are we going to deal with next? Object 277... Object 257 is probably going to be an object of some description. There's the FV as well, going for the commander's hatch there, and a nice penetration to deal with that guy. Object 257 is probably going to be next, or possibly the FV, I suppose, or the side of that VK. Nice penetration there. 6 rounds of ammunition left, up to 4 kills. Scoreline is 9-9. That was just a bad shot. It's just never going to work. Needed more lead on that one. He just wasn't aiming at the FV. I think that was the adrenaline getting to Gaz a little bit there. FV 4005 is no more, and to be fair, like, you can understand the adrenaline getting to Gaz there, and he does actually use a high explosive round to take Gaz down so that he can use an armor piercing round to deal with this. No, he loaded a HE round. I mean, I guess the guy was on low health. Loading a HE round in that scenario wasn't terrible, but probably wanted to aim that round a bit better. Upper front plate of a Jagdtiger, 270 pen, dealing with that with no difficulty whatsoever. There's another one into the Jagdtiger, and unfortunately Gaz here only has 1 round of ammunition left. Where's it gonna go? Into the Jagdtiger. That's it. That's all of it. And this is the thing, you've got a reasonably decent reload on this tank. Only 40 rounds of ammunition. So, yeah, this match isn't going to go on for that much longer, so we're just going to watch this one to the end, because Gaz, bless him, is like, I have no ammo left, what could I do? Ram! Now, you'll notice he does 326 damage to the Jagdtiger, to be fair. And get some assistance into the bargain, and if he can do that again, that might be a kill. Oh, never mind. Out of ammo, but can still keep stabbing the things in the face. Who's next? Object 430. And there's the FV from earlier on, who was in a terrible position, is still alive and has 3 kills. He's also on the other side of the map. Much closer is this Object 430. If you remember, I said that the chieftain here was actually relatively mobile, and bosh! That's how you do your tank when you're out of ammo. Turret hug the guy to try not to take any damage, takes a hit from the FV over to his flank there, but friendly WZ takes out the 430 and just trying to not get hit by this FV. It would be hilarious if Gaz could do this again, but no, the E50 actually finishes the guy off. So, there we go. That is the match there from Gaz in his T95/FV4201. Let's have a look at the post-game stats. So, that was finally enough for an ace tanker in this damn thing. Hand of God, Bruiser, Fighter, Fire for Effect, Shell-Proof, and that's a lot of little ribbons, and I don't know what they all are. Cool-Headed, Spartan, Confederate, Steel Wall, High Caliber. Not actually a Top Gun, which, given the amount of damage, is quite impressive. 14,345 damage done, 5 kills, 1,729 base experience. Like, just, that's a carry. All of his ammunition fired, all 40 rounds. 36 hits, 32 penetrations. He was taking a couple of shots that were a little bit dicey, but then I guess it's not every day you have to use literally all of your ammunition and then ram people to do over 14,000 damage. That is bonkers. 6,000 damage blocked by his armor as well. 10-minute match. Even made a profit into the bargain just to really rub it in. I would like to say, by the way, I have actually seen one of these tanks in a game more recently. I was in my M103, we were on Himmelsdorf, and I had an okay game, but the guy actually ended up having to carry that game. I think he ended up with 6 kills, 8 kills, about 8,000 damage, somewhere in the 1,1500 base XP region, and it seems these days that is enough for an ace as well. I did have a chat with him after the game. So, there we go. I hope you guys enjoyed this video looking at one of the less well-balanced tanks in this game, I think it is fair to say. This is just a Super Conqueror that has been ratcheted up to 11, which, given the Super Conqueror was already a pretty darn good tank, is a bit weird. And you might have noticed that my small person is in the background, but hey-ho, I'll be with you in just a sec, my dear. Hope you guys enjoyed. Have fun doing whatever it is you're doing today. If this video comes out on the day I am intending it to come out, it will be Christmas. Have a lovely day. Have a lovely time with family. So I guess it's apt that there's a young baby trying to get my attention. And oh, okay, she's a toddler now. Fine, she does indeed toddle. Enjoy whatever it is you're doing. Stay safe, all that good stuff. And I will catch you in another video, ladies and gents. Ciao, ciao.